Have you ever experienced goosebumps about some place just by its mere mention? And that is exactly how I felt about the mountains located near my hometown. I always heard that everyone was possessed by a ghost, but I never believed in their existence, at least not until my travels into the great unknown started. One fine Saturday morning, I woke up to foggy weather and decided to embark on a journey to the haunted mountains. My best friend Sarah joined me. Shim ordered me. "Are you sure you want to do this?" She sounded scared a little. I laughed and shrugged. Well, why not? What's the worst that can happen? Cookies, beverages, a small torch, and a map were packed in the respective backpacks of each of us. The road leading to the mountains was inclined and climbed. Have you ever strolled along a path that felt as if the very earth was divulging its tales? It's how it looked as we progressed further along the mountain. These trees were very big and gnarled, and many of their branches resembled emaciated limbs. The atmosphere was dense, as if I couldn't breathe properly. "Hey, listen," Sarah remarked suddenly as she ceased walking. I listened carefully. First there was the silence of the forest and the sound of rustling leaves, so I felt that I also encountered it. There was something like a low, mournful tune that seemed to come from the very stillness of the night. Where did it start from? We went on following the sound, as our curiosity got the best of us, for it led us to a decrepit cabin, which appeared to have been uninhabited for some time. The window panes had been smashed, and the door swung open in a rusty sound. Who lived here before, and why did they leave? Inside the cabin, everything found, including the furniture, was all dusty. I saw old photos in the rooms. The images depicted a happy family, yet the faces appeared to shift, as if the eyes drew along with us around the locality. "This is creepy," Sarah whispered. I gave a more rigorous nod in response. I shuddered at the thought alone. Later, in the corner of the chair, we discovered a diary. The pages of the book were pale yellow. Before returning to the locker, we looked through it and found out that it belonged to a girl named Emily. Her final note had been written 50 years prior. On the first page it states, "I hear them calling my name every night." Getting out of the cabin, we noticed that the sun was setting, and the shadows on the grass and the forest were long. The ghostly tune started to play even louder. This appeared to be getting closer and closer to the mouth of the mountain ranges, but we felt inclined to do so, even though it was growing dark earlier in the evening. "Perhaps it is best that I leave," Sarah stammered out. I began to wonder whether it was so or not, but my curiosity drove my actions further. It then progressed to become a single file path, marked with obstacles. There were other symbols, written in forms that could not be easily identified, which were painted on the rocks, and seemed to be emitting a rather dim light in the pull of the moon. What did they mean? Finally, we got to a clearing that we decided was the perfect place for us animals to make our home. In the center, there was a large stone table on which green moss began to overgrow, and ivy grew. Around it, several spirits swirling like a wisp of smoke danced gracefully on the tune of that melody. The life had drained out of their eyes, and their faces were blank. Some of them I saw in the cabin when I looked at the photos, and one of them was Emily. "Emily!" I shouted over the noise, but she did not turn around or seem to hear me. Instead, she continued dancing to the music with this strange look on her face, as if she was possessed. The mystery of what happened to her has remained a mystery to the whole community. And were we next? We did not have time to think before their actions. They advanced towards us with red-violet glowing eyes. Then that wind blew through the clearing, as if it was cold, and that music rose to completely that roaring point. Lost while hiking? Imbalanced and frustrated, Sarah shouted out, "We must leave this place!" We quickly rushed back down the path while we did not dare to look back. The melody continued with us, ringing in the ears. Days became weeks, and still, I believed that the haunted mountains were beckoning me to return. I attempted to dismiss the sound, but night after night, the ghostly tune would sound in my head and become louder and louder. Have you ever felt like there was a force guiding you towards the edge of a cliff, and you didn't have control over it? That one night, I sweated during the night and woke up all wet. The melody was so loud, as if it was coming from within my head. "We have to go back," I told Sarah the following morning. She looked at me as if I were mad. "You must be kidding. After such a scene?" But my curiosity became an obsession. What if there were answers to the questions that haunted us? What if Emily was still out there and had no one to return to? Finally, Sarah agreed to go with me next time. I promised her that we would be better prepared with more flashlights, a first aid kit, and protective amulets, which we bought from a woman from the black market in the town. "These will keep the spirits at bay," she had said with a certain glint in her eyes that seemed to hold a world of understanding. Did she believe in these charms, or was she just seeking ways to console us? When we returned to the forest, the temperature seemed even lower, and the oppressive energy was even stronger here. Suddenly, the whispers appeared to be louder and more insistent than before. Have you ever had the feeling that the entire world is holding its breath and waiting for you to do something? We went back to the deserted cabin. Everything was similar, but at the same time, it was different. The atmosphere inside was tense. Nevertheless, the haunted mountains remained compelling to me. It was like a sore that could not be rubbed, or a problem that could not be solved. Sarah continued to plead for me to let it go, but how could I? Do you ever get that feeling that you're just moments away from revealing something that you simply can't walk away from? One evening, it got the better of me. I packed my bag with the essentials, a flashlight, an old map, and a notebook. So this time I chose to go alone. Perhaps the spirits are more aggressive if there are too many of them. Was this a mistake? Only time will tell. I moved up the familiar trail in complete silence, the forest seeming to be asleep. The air got more oppressive than before, and the whispers grew louder and more urgent. Were they telling me these things for my good, or were they leading me further into their web? When I arrived at the abandoned cabin, I discovered the note that we had written to Emily. It was gone, replaced by a single word, scratched into the wood. Help. My heart raced, and I felt lightheaded. Emily was still out there, somewhere, but how could I reach her? After the glowing symbols, I had a faint feeling of familiarity that pervaded my body. The path looked somewhat familiar, but at the same time, incredibly unfamiliar, as if I was walking through some sort of dream. Or was it a nightmare? A night approached, and the tune returned, encompassing me in its cold embrace. The clearing with the stone altar came into my sight, and everything was illuminated by the cold glow of ghosts. The figures were there, more numerous and solid than ever. She was standing in the middle of the room, her gaze fixed on me, the blend of remorse and desperation in her expression visible. "Emily!" I shouted in a shaky tone. "What can I do for you?" She walked, and her movements were as if she was a candle trembling in the wind. "You must break the curse," the girl whispered. "It's time to locate the source and exterminate it." "What's the source? Where is it?" I demanded, as the despair seeped into my tone. But before she could answer, the ground opened up, and the figures started moving towards the two of us. I tried to escape their hands and headed towards the stone temple to look for a clue. On its surface, there were the same symbols that were on the rocks on the way. The temperature, however, dropped as the figures surrounding me drew nearer. Was I capable of helping Emily, or was I in over my head now? At that moment, I turned and saw someone touching my shoulder. As I turned around, I found myself standing in front of Emily, but her eyes changed. They turned black and full of hatred. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered venomously. "What do you mean?" I said, fear oozing in my voice. She smiled forlornly, but the malicious glint in her eyes showed that there was no love left in her heart. "Well, you know, the others are tied here because of me." I hardly remember the events that followed that with much precision, but from what I understand, people visit these mountains often, even now, but whenever I try to call them, they shout. I wonder why.